Well, thank you, and good evening, everyone. I'd like to start with a question. Why don't we wear hats anymore? Here's a 19th century painting depicting a snow-covered snow hill in Holborn, London. And you might notice that almost everyone is wearing a hat of some sort. And there may be many factors which could be offered to answer that question. But I think the main reason is that today we tend to spend our time indoors, at home, in a car, in a train, in an office or a supermarket, and are protected from the elements. And so we don't need a hat. But these ceilings obscure the heavens from our view. You can imagine David as a shepherd boy spending almost all of his time outdoors. And he would have spent time admiring and considering the heavens, the warm and powerful sun, and the cool, bright stars. And we saw this in Psalm 19. David's thoughts on the heavens. The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament showeth his handiwork. The Bible gives the heavens as evidence of God's glory. And this is not only in this psalm, but it's a common refrain throughout the Bible that God is the maker of the heavens. Nehemiah 9 verse 6, for example, says, "Thou, even thou, art Lord alone. Thou hast made heaven, the heaven of heavens, with all their host, the earth and all things that are therein, the seas and all that is therein, and thou preservest them all, and the host of heaven worshippeth thee." The Bible also says that the heavens are God's dwelling place. Lamentations 3 says, "Let us lift up our heart with our hands unto God in the heavens." Also Psalm 123, "Unto thee lift I up mine eyes, O thou that dwellest in the heavens." And so people in the Bible looked up to the heavens to look up to God. And so I'd like us to take a moment this evening to consider the heavens, to see their glory. We'll think about their order, their beauty and power, and then we'll think particularly about the sun. But one thing I want to do is to encourage you to look up at the heavens for yourself. We've said that David in the Psalms looked up to the heavens. In Psalm 5 he says, "My voice shalt thou hear in the morning, O Lord. In the morning will I direct my prayer unto thee, and will look up." He sets an example of getting outside of ourselves and looking up to heaven. Now, it's true that if we want to look at the stars, often the conditions here in the UK are against us. The stars are often obscured by cloud. And so to do this, we need to look for nights with clear skies. But I should warn you, though, that what we see here today when we look up to the skies is not the same as what David would have seen. And this is due to another challenge, which is light pollution. This diagram shows different levels of light pollution, from a perfectly dark sky on the left, where you can see a great number of stars, to a Bortle level 8 or 9 on the right, where barely anything is visible. From the centre of Rugby, we're about a Bortle level 6. And so to go and look at the stars, it's best to go to a rural location, away from streetlights, and see the heavens open up. And if you do manage to go to a pitch black location, rather than tens of stars in the sky, you'll see thousands. And so we can understand how David would look up and admire their beauty. And it's something that people have done throughout history. Vincent van Gogh said this: "For my part, I know nothing with any certainty, but the sight of the stars makes me dream." So the Bible talks about God creating the heavens in Genesis chapter 1. It says, "And God said, 'Let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years.'" And so when God created the heavens, he set them in order for signs and seasons. And we can take for granted the predictability of the heavens. Jeremiah says, "Thus saith the Lord, if ye can break my covenant of the day and my covenant of the night, and that there should not be day and night in their season." So these things are sure and continual things that we see day by day. Each morning the sun rises from a predictable part of the horizon that depends on the season, and each night it sets again, and we know that it will come back the next day. And as well as the cycle of the sun, the stars are fixed in the sky. So much so that the North Star is used, or has been used, for navigation across the seas. And the patterns of the stars each night appear the same and can be mapped. However, there is an exception in the planets. In the centre of this image is Mars, the red light labelled in the centre. But you can see from night to night, it wanders across the rest of the stars. And this is, in fact, referred to in the Bible in Jude 1, where it says, "Raging waves of the sea, foaming out their own shame, wandering stars, to whom is reserved the blackness of darkness forever." And the word wandering there is the word planetes. And so we know that Mars is one of the planets, one of the wandering stars in the sky. And these were worshipped in ancient times. They're named after Roman gods. So we've seen Mars, but another of the planets is Jupiter. Jupiter is one of the brightest objects in the night sky that you can see there. And the only brighter object, apart from the sun and the moon, is Venus, the morning star. Here's another quote about the stars. "The stars are the jewels of the night, and perchance surpass anything which day has to show." So what stars are there that we might see? Well, Job refers to two particular groups of stars in Job 38. "Canst thou bind the sweet influences of Pleiades, or loose the bands of Orion?" Orion is one of the easier constellations to spot. And you can see it's got the three stars forming the band of Orion, and below it is the sword. And if you're able to zoom into that sword, you see a nebula, which looks like this. Another constellation you can see in the sky is Perseus, which is relevant at this time of year because it's the time of the Perseids. This is a meteor shower where you can see shooting stars that start to appear in the sky. And they come from the area of the sky occupied by the constellation Perseus. And you see more and more of them up until the 12th of August, where they start to diminish again. But in Job we read of the Pleiades. That's a cluster of stars which is, again, bright in the sky, found in the constellation Taurus. Also called the Seven Sisters. It's the group of 7 stars that you can see. But although there's 7 bright stars that you can see easily, whenever you magnify the night sky with binoculars or a telescope, thousands more stars appear. And this is wherever you look in the sky. You see this particularly when you see the milky white band across the sky, which gives the name to the Milky Way galaxy. And the number of stars inside it is estimated to contain 100 billion to 400 billion stars. And this is just our galaxy. Outside of our galaxy are many others. One of the easiest for us to see in the night sky is the Andromeda galaxy, also known as M31, and it's estimated to contain approximately 1 trillion stars. And so we start to appreciate the magnitude and scale of the heavens. And with better and better telescopes, this is an image from the Hubble telescope, you can see more and more galaxies, each containing billions of stars. And the exact number of galaxies in the universe is not known, but estimated to range in the hundreds of billions of galaxies. The Hubble Space Telescope's deep field observations have allowed astronomers to estimate there are around 100 billion to 200 billion galaxies in the observable universe. However, more recent studies suggest that this number could be even higher, potentially reaching up to 2 trillion galaxies, when accounting for faint and distant galaxies that are difficult to detect. And these estimates continue to evolve as our observational capabilities improve. But let's now come a bit closer to home and think about the sun. Because in the day, all of these stars and galaxies are overpowered by the brightness of the sun, due to its position much closer to us than any other star. And we read particularly about the sun in Psalm 19. Verse 4 said, "Their line is gone out through all the earth, and their words to the end of the world. In them hath he set a tabernacle for the sun, which is as a bridegroom coming out of his chamber, and rejoiceth as a strong man to run a race. His going forth is from the end of the heaven, and his circuit unto the ends of it. And there is nothing hid from the heat thereof." And so again, the sun is perhaps something that we can take for granted. But it sustains all life on earth. Plants and algae use the sun's light to grow, and in turn they feed the animals. Without the sun, the earth would be desolate. The sun's heat warms the earth's surface, creating the conditions necessary for liquid water to exist. And this heat is distributed around the globe by atmospheric and oceanic currents, maintaining a relatively stable temperature range that supports diverse ecosystems. And in humans and many other animals, exposure to sunlight triggers the production of vitamin D, which is essential for bone health and immune function. And so we see that the sun is an essential part of the heavens. And so what do we make of this? What has science told us? Well, research into space is often presented as though everything is explained by the Big Bang. But in reality, science is in flux. I'm not an expert or an astrophysicist, but experts in the field recognise there are difficulties in the current scientific explanations for the formation of the heavens. If we think about the formation of stars, for example, for a star to form, it requires gas to be at a high enough density to have enough gravity to overcome gas pressure and therefore keep itself together to form a star. And stars form from clouds of gas. But on its own, gravity is too weak to bring together a cloud of gas, seeing that it disperses due to gas pressure. And there are answers to this, such as compression due to a supernova or collisions of galaxies. But these require there to already be previous stars to sort of chain react onto the production of a new star. And so this is a challenging problem, and comments have been made that we don't understand how a single star forms, yet we want to understand how 10 billion stars form. And Neil deGrasse Tyson in 2007 said, "If none of us knew in advance that stars exist, frontline research would offer plenty of convincing reasons for why stars could never form." Now, there are models that explain this. They rely on dark matter, something that we don't understand but predict must be there. And so if we come back to thinking about our sun, we saw how it performs many important functions for sustaining life on Earth that we might take for granted. And you might hear this sentiment about the sun, or our position in the universe. Where are we? Who are we? We find that we live on an insignificant planet of a humdrum star lost in a galaxy, tucked away in some forgotten corner of a universe in which there are far more galaxies than people. But research into the stars and into our sun show that stars like our sun are not at all common. Dr. Donald Brownlee said this: "People say that the sun is a typical star. That's not true. Almost all environments in the universe are terrible for life. It's only Garden of Eden places like Earth where it can exist." And scientists and astronomers have looked for stars that are similar to the sun. But these are few and far between. There are only a few candidates, and these are nearly all variable stars with brightness that changes over time. And so the stable sunlight that we rely on and are used to, which is unchanging, is very extraordinary. If the sun started to shine hotter or cooler, this would have significant impacts on Earth. If it changed by 1%, this would lead to a 1 degree Celsius change in global average temperature. Another extraordinary thing about our sun is solar flares. Solar flares produce the northern lights effect in the sky. And you might have seen that over the past year the sun has been especially active, and at times the northern lights have been visible in this country. But although these are impressive, compared to other stars, these solar flares are quite tame. The more common smaller class of star, the red dwarf, has flares which are much more violent, thousands of times bigger than the flares of our sun. But also, stars more similar to our sun have super flares, one paper, superflares on ordinary solar-type stars suggested that the sun can cause superflares, flares of 700 or 1,000 times more powerful than a typical solar flare, and that these would expect to occur every 3,000 or 6,000 years. It's thought that such a superflare, if directed at Earth, it would be hard to predict the results, but it could cause widespread power grid failures, damage satellites, and pose radiation risks. However, such events have not been recorded for the Sun. It is an exceptional, stable star. And so the Bible invites us to consider the heavens and how they declare the glory of God. As we read in Psalm 19, the heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament showeth his handiwork. But it also invites us to learn about his purpose. Verse 7 said, "The law of the Lord is perfect, converting the soul. The testimony of the Lord is sure, making wise the simple." And so the God who created the heavens wants to affect us and our minds. And so we can choose to theorize about how these things might have come about by undirected processes. Or we can choose to turn to the Bible and to listen to the word of the Creator. Psalm 8 says, "When I consider thy heavens, the work of thy fingers, the moon and the stars which thou hast ordained. What is man, that thou art mindful of him, and the son of man, that thou visitest him?" And so I invite you to open your Bibles and to search out the good news found therein.